There are moments in television history when the laughter you hear through the screen hides storms you'll never see. For the audience at home, a sitcom feels light, effortless, and joyful. But behind the curtain, on sets where millions of dollars and millions of viewers are at stake, the mood is often very different. Egos collide, tensions brew, and hidden animosities sometimes grow so strong that they define the experience for those who live through it. Few shows exemplify this better than Cheers. Premiering on NBC in 1982, the series seemed destined for greatness. Its premise was simple: a Boston bar where everybody knows your name. Its execution, however, was extraordinary. The writing was witty, the characters unforgettable, and the chemistry electric. Over the course of 11 seasons, Cheers became one of the most iconic sitcoms in television history, winning dozens of awards and embedding itself permanently into pop culture.
Oh my God.
Well?
You're a magnificent pagan beast.
Thanks. What's the message? Afternoon, everybody. No!
I'm getting a tan off your camera lights.
She became known as Backseat Becky.
But not all the smiles were real. For Kelsey Grammer, who joined the show midway through its run, the experience was both the biggest break of his life and one of the hardest chapters of his career. On screen, he shined as Dr. Frasier Crane, the pompous psychiatrist whose sharp wit and endless neuroses won over millions of viewers. Off-screen, however, Grammer carried the weight of unimaginable personal tragedy, addiction, and, perhaps most infamously, an increasingly bitter feud with one of his co-stars. That co-star was Shelley Long, the actress who played Diane Chambers. For years, Grammer kept his comments measured. He avoided outright hostility in public, though his silence was telling. But in more recent years, Grammer has spoken more candidly. He has revealed that while Cheers gave him everything, fame, fortune, and eventually the spin-off Frasier, it also gave him one of the most difficult working relationships of his life. And in Grammer's words, that relationship became one of resentment, frustration, and ultimately, hatred. The early days of Cheers. To understand why Grammer's confession hits so hard, you have to understand what Cheers meant to television in the 1980s. Created by Glenn and Les Charles and James Burrows, the show was risky at first. The pilot episode aired to modest reviews, and its first season ranked dead last in the Nielsen ratings. Many expected NBC to cancel it. Instead, the network held firm. Word of mouth spread, critical praise grew, and by the time Season 2 aired, Cheers was no longer a struggling newcomer. It was a phenomenon. Audiences fell in love with Sam Malone, the former Red Sox pitcher turned charming bar owner played by Ted Danson. They adored Diane Chambers, the intelligent but often pretentious waitress played by Shelley Long. Together, Sam and Diane became one of television's most iconic will-they-won't-they couples, fueling the show's popularity for years.
How do you think it feels to be attracted to someone that makes you sick?
Around them, a colorful cast of barflies and staff created an ensemble that felt both relatable and endlessly funny. It was into this already beloved world that Kelsey Grammer walked in 1984. At that time, Grammer was a classically trained actor. He had studied at Juilliard, cut his teeth on Shakespeare, and carried the gravitas of a stage performer. Hollywood had not yet given him a chance to shine. When the role of Frasier Crane came along, it was supposed to be temporary. Just 6 episodes. Diane needed a new love interest to complicate her relationship with Sam, and Grammer was cast as the dry, pompous psychiatrist who would serve as that wedge. But something happened that no one predicted. The audience loved him. His blend of intellectual arrogance and comedic vulnerability was unlike anything else on television. Writers quickly expanded his role, and Grammer became a permanent fixture. From the outside, it looked like a dream. For Grammer, however, stepping into Cheers wasn't so simple. An outsider in a tight family. By the time Kelsey Grammer walked onto the set of Cheers, the series was already thriving as a well-oiled machine. The original cast, Ted Danson, Shelley Long, Rhea Perlman, George Wendt, and Nicholas Colasanto, had spent 2 full seasons building not only their characters, but also genuine relationships with one another.
Guy's wearing shoulder pads, and I bet those isn't even the...
Looking stand by.
You are, Bob.
The only two just... What is that?
I want to know which one of you dames.
I'll show you what a good time.
They had survived the uncertainty of the show's shaky first season, when cancellation seemed inevitable, and together, they had celebrated its rise into a cultural phenomenon. Those early struggles forged a deep camaraderie among them. They knew one another's rhythms, trusted each other's instincts, and had developed a creative culture that gave the show its effortless flow. Into that tight-knit circle stepped Grammer, a classically trained stage actor with little experience in television comedy. His character, Dr. Frasier Crane, was meant to disrupt the balance by challenging the central romance between Sam Malone and Diane Chambers. From the outset, Grammer was aware that his very purpose on screen was to play the outsider, the interloper who stood in the way of what fans wanted most. What he could not have anticipated was how much that role would echo his own feelings behind the camera. Grammer later admitted that he always felt slightly out of place during those early years. He hadn't endured the hardships of the cast's first season. When Cheers teetered on the brink of cancellation, he hadn't been part of the long nights and shared anxieties that cemented the bonds among the original group. Instead, he arrived after the family was already formed, stepping into their inside jokes and long-established dynamics as the new guy who had yet to earn their trust. Some cast members greeted him warmly, recognizing his talent and appreciating the new dimensions he brought to the ensemble. Others, however, were more cautious, and the adjustment wasn't always seamless. Nowhere was the challenge greater than in his relationship with Shelley Long. Brilliant and acclaimed though she was, Long had a reputation for being difficult to work alongside, and Grammer quickly discovered that their professional chemistry came at a personal cost. While their characters' interactions added spark to the screen, their working relationship off-screen was strained from the start, setting the stage for one of the most enduring conflicts of Grammer's career. Shelley Long, star power and strain. Shelley Long was, in many ways, the heart of Cheers during its early years. Brilliantly funny, sharp, and fully committed to her character, she elevated the Sam and Diane storyline into one of television's great love sagas. Critics adored her. She won an Emmy for her performance and became one of the show's breakout stars. But behind the accolades, Long developed a reputation as difficult. Multiple cast and crew members have spoken over the years about her perfectionism and constant questioning of scripts. She had strong opinions about Diane's character and often insisted on changes, sometimes clashing with writers or holding up production. For some, this was evidence of her commitment to quality. For others, it was exhausting. For Kelsey Grammer, it was unbearable. He later admitted that while he respected Long's talent, he found her impossible to work with. In interviews years later, he didn't mince words. He described her as the most hated co-star he had ever endured, calling the atmosphere on set with her misery. Those are strong words from a man who built a career on professionalism. Why was the friction so intense? Part of it was personality. Grammer valued efficiency, trust in the writers, and ensemble collaboration. Long's constant critiques and resistance to direction, in his view, undermined that. He also felt that her off-screen behavior made the set tense, draining what should have been a joyful experience. Grammer's silent struggles. Complicating all of this were Grammer's own personal battles. Behind the curtain, his life was marked by tragedy. Years earlier, his father had been murdered. Later, his sister was brutally killed, a trauma that haunted him for decades.
It was an Oreo cookie dipped in an ice cold Coca-Cola. She was a poem, a light, fun, innocent and wise. Brave, a warrior, a sister, the best sister.
And you were older, but you say she was bolder.
She was. I was older, she was bolder.
He struggled with addiction, alcoholism, and bouts of depression. When he came to Cheers, he was carrying all of that weight, while trying to maintain the image of the witty, arrogant Frasier Crane. In such circumstances, the set could have been a sanctuary, a place of stability and camaraderie. Instead, Grammer often found it to be another battlefield. Shelley Long's presence, rather than being a source of support, was for him a source of tension. Still, he persevered. He delivered scene after scene of brilliance, making Frasier Crane one of the most memorable characters in sitcom history. He smiled through gritted teeth, laughed in character while fuming inside, and kept the audience unaware of the storm raging behind the bar. The Seeds of Hatred. By the mid-1980s, Grammer's disdain for Shelley Long was no longer a secret to those closest to him. While he remained professional, those who worked on the show could sense the tension. The chemistry between Frasier and Diane on screen, which was meant to be uneasy, was fueled by genuine animosity off-screen. It was not just a clash of personalities, but a clash of philosophies. To Grammer, acting was about trust and collaboration. To Long, it was about protecting the integrity of her character, even if it meant questioning others. Neither approach was inherently wrong, but together they were combustible. Grammer has said that those years on Cheers with Long left a lasting scar. Even decades later, when asked about her, he did not soften his words. He did not laugh it off as youthful ego or chalk it up to misunderstandings. He remained firm. Working with Shelley Long was one of the worst experiences of his career. When Shelley Long announced in 1987 that she was leaving Cheers, the entertainment press went into overdrive. It was the kind of decision that could have killed a lesser show. After all, Diane Chambers wasn't just another character. She was half of the Sam and Diane dynamic that defined Cheers during its first 5 seasons. Her constant intellectual sparring with Ted Danson's Sam Malone had been the heartbeat of the series. Their will they won't they romance kept audiences glued to the screen, and many critics openly wondered if Cheers could survive without her. For Kelsey Grammer, however, the news was nothing short of liberating. Behind his dry wit and professional demeanor, Grammer had endured years of tension with Long. She was, in his view, a disruptive presence on set, and her departure promised a fresh start. Where others feared collapse, Grammer sensed opportunity, and he wasn't wrong. The years following Long's departure marked not only the survival of Cheers, but also the beginning of what many fans and critics consider the show's golden era. For Grammer, it also marked the blossoming of his own career, a transformation from supporting player to indispensable member of television's greatest ensemble. Shelley Long's exit, a turning point. Long's decision to leave Cheers was controversial. She cited creative differences, a desire to pursue film opportunities, and the feeling that her character's story had run its course. To the public, she offered gracious words about her time on the show.
I left Cheers because I wasn't happy. And I wanted to be happier. And I wanted to spend more time with my family.
I've been annoyed by the comments and the constant question of, do you regret? Do you ever regret? It's, I love them, and I like being with them. And I sincerely wanted more time with them, which I got.
But within the industry, whispers circulated about her clashes with writers, producers, and co-stars. Kelsey Grammer, reflecting years later, admitted he didn't shed a single tear over her departure. When she was gone, he said bluntly, the show could breathe again. Those words weren't just about personal dislike. To Grammer, Long's exit represented the removal of a weight that had held the ensemble back. Without her, the writers were free to explore new dynamics. The endless cycle of Sam and Diane arguments gave way to fresh storylines, and the introduction of Kirstie Alley as Rebecca Howe brought new energy to the bar. Rebecca was different, ambitious, vulnerable, and often hilariously inept. She wasn't a Diane replacement. She was something else entirely, and audiences responded. The ratings proved the gamble worked. Cheers didn't just survive Long's departure, it thrived. The show became a staple of NBC's powerhouse Thursday night lineup, cementing its legacy as one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Grammer steps into the spotlight. For Kelsey Grammer, these years were transformative. With Long gone, his character no longer had to serve as the intellectual wedge between Sam and Diane. Instead, the writers expanded Frasier Crane into a full-fledged member of the bar's extended family. Frasier's arrogance became a reliable source of comedy, but so did his vulnerabilities. He was pompous but lonely, brilliant but insecure. He lectured endlessly about Freud and Jung, but found himself just as hopeless in love as the rest of the gang. In many ways, he was the perfect Cheers character, both larger than life and painfully human. Grammer seized the opportunity with both hands. He delivered performances that balanced razor-sharp timing with genuine pathos, elevating Frasier from a side character into one of the show's most beloved figures. Fans adored him, critics praised him, and behind the scenes, Grammer finally felt the creative space to shine without the constant friction of Shelley Long's presence. Still, even as the show soared and Grammer's career blossomed, the bitterness toward Long didn't vanish. If anything, it calcified into something permanent. When asked about her years later, Grammer did not join the chorus of nostalgia. He did not offer diplomatic platitudes. Instead, he spoke with the same blunt honesty that had defined his original feelings. Working with her was misery, and he had no interest in rewriting history to make it sound sweeter than it was. The ensemble without Diane. The absence of Shelley Long marked a dramatic shift not only in the direction of Cheers, but in the atmosphere of the production itself. When Kirstie Alley stepped into the role of Rebecca Howe in 1987, the energy of the series changed almost overnight. Unlike Diane Chambers, Rebecca was not written as an intellectual equal to Sam Malone, but rather as an ambitious, insecure, and often comically frazzled manager. That difference gave the show a fresh dynamic, allowing the writers to explore new storylines and giving the cast new opportunities to stretch their characters. Kirstie Alley's arrival also brought a noticeable warmth to the ensemble off-screen. Her personality, lighter and less combative, set a very different tone during rehearsals and tapings. She approached the work with enthusiasm rather than contention, and the effect was immediate. Ted Danson later reflected that while Shelley Long's brilliance was undeniable, Alley's presence made the set fun again. George Wendt, beloved as Norm, noted that the production became more relaxed, with fewer debates over creative choices and less tension with the writers. Rhea Perlman echoed those sentiments, describing the post-Long years as smoother, with the ensemble finally feeling unified in a way it hadn't before.
Always rumors that there was so much friction between Shelley Long and the cast.
Yeah.
That had to be I mean, was that true?
There was, there was a little, but, she left and then we had Kirstie and life moved on.
Yeah.
Truly one of the greatest first days, as was when Woody took over for Coach, who died,
yes.
Nicole Santo.
For Kelsey Grammer, this change meant more than just a pleasant working environment. It meant belonging. During his earliest years on the show, he often felt like the outsider, stepping into a cast that already considered itself a family. The dynamic with Shelley Long had only heightened that sense of separation, but once Kirstie Alley joined, the cast dynamics shifted. The walls that had once kept Grammer on the periphery seemed to dissolve. The tragedy of Nicholas Colasanto's passing in 1985 had already left the group mourning the loss of their beloved coach.
He just was rock solid. He had so much history going for him. He was definitely the father.
Nick and Nick's character cared about me, Shelley, and me, Diane. And that was part of the dynamic on and off the set.
His absence had changed the atmosphere permanently, but Woody Harrelson's addition as the naive and lovable Woody Boyd had helped fill the gap, injecting youthful energy into the show. Now, with Rebecca in the mix, the balance felt more complete than ever. Grammer, whose character Frasier had once been introduced as a short-term complication in Sam and Diane's romance, was no longer the outsider. He was a cornerstone of the ensemble, as vital to the success of Cheers as Norm, Carla, or Cliff. The bar felt whole again, and for the first time, Grammer felt like he had truly found his place within the family. Grammer's personal battles. It's impossible to talk about this period of Grammer's life without acknowledging his personal struggles. Even as his professional career soared, his private life remained marked by pain and chaos. Grammer's battles with addiction intensified during the late 1980s. He was arrested multiple times for driving under the influence and drug possession. His drinking spiraled, and he often arrived on set hungover or exhausted. Cast and crew worried about him, but his immense talent kept him employed. On top of that, the tragedies of his past continued to haunt him. His father had been murdered when Grammer was just 13. His sister Karen had been brutally killed when he was in his early 20s. His half-brothers died in a diving accident. The grief never left him, and substances became his escape. In interviews years later, Grammer admitted that while he was grateful for his success, he often felt unworthy of it. The pain in his personal life and the animosity he carried from Cheers coexisted uneasily. On screen, he was brilliant. Off screen, he was broken. And yet, perhaps paradoxically, it was his very brokenness that made Frasier Crane so compelling. The audience saw in him both comedy and tragedy, arrogance and loneliness. Grammer channeled his pain into his art, creating a character that would outlive not just Cheers, but almost every sitcom of its generation, from supporting character to star. As Cheers moved into its final seasons in the early 1990s, Kelsey Grammer's place in television history was already secure. What had begun as a short-term role meant to disrupt the romance of Sam, and Diane had transformed into one of the most beloved characters in the ensemble. By this point, Dr. Frasier Crane was no longer a supporting distraction. He was a fully developed figure with his own quirks, vulnerabilities, and legions of fans. The pompous psychiatrist with the fragile ego had struck a chord, and his name had become as recognizable as Sam Malone or Norm Peterson. NBC executives quickly recognized the potential in the character. Spin-offs were always risky, often doomed to pale in comparison to their originals. Yet with Frasier Crane, there was something different. Viewers saw more than just comic relief. They saw depth. There was a sense that his story had room to grow beyond the walls of a Boston bar. As the writers prepared to close Cheers in 1993, discussions began about extending Grammer's journey into an entirely new series. Initially, Grammer resisted. He was acutely aware of the dangers. Most spin-offs never survived beyond a season or two, collapsing under the weight of audience expectations. He also worried that overexposure might dilute the character he had spent years carefully crafting. But then came a creative proposal that changed everything. Rather than keeping Frasier in Boston, the writers suggested a complete relocation, Seattle. In this new setting, Frasier would reinvent himself as a radio psychiatrist, trading the bar stools of Cheers for the airwaves of talk radio. Alongside him, a new ensemble would emerge. His ex-cop father Martin, played by John Mahoney, the eccentric English housekeeper Daphne, played by Jane Leaves, and his equally neurotic brother Niles, played brilliantly by David Hyde Pierce. The gamble paid off. When Frasier debuted in 1993, it was an instant success. Critics praised its sharp wit, intellectual humor, and seamless blend of sophistication and slapstick. Over the course of 11 seasons, Frasier not only matched the success of its predecessor, but in some ways surpassed it.
The real clue here is the veneer.
Veneer! If you've got really fine pieces of furniture, it doesn't matter if they match, they will go together. It's your money.
The series won 37 Emmy Awards, set records, and established Grammer as one of the most decorated actors in television history. Yet even as Frasier soared, the shadow of Shelley Long remained. In a nod to continuity, Long reprised her role as Diane Chambers in a guest appearance. Fans celebrated the reunion, eager to see the familiar spark between Frasier and Diane once again. But behind the scenes, Grammer admitted the truth. It was an exercise in professionalism, not affection. He agreed because the show needed it, not because he had any desire to rekindle the working relationship that had once caused him so much misery. The lingering resentment. Why did Grammer's resentment toward Long last so long? For many actors, time heals old wounds, rivalries fade, egos cool, and years later, former adversaries laugh together at conventions or interviews. But for Grammer, the bitterness remained raw. Part of it was the intensity of those years. Cheers was his breakthrough, his introduction to stardom. The tension he felt on set was intertwined with his struggles off set, magnifying everything. Long wasn't just another difficult co-star. She became, in his memory, the embodiment of everything that made his early career painful. Another part was Grammer's own temperament. He has always been brutally honest, unafraid to voice unpopular opinions. Where others might sugarcoat their feelings for the sake of diplomacy, Grammer told the truth as he saw it, and his truth was simple. Working with Shelley Long was misery, and he never forgave her for it. Even decades later, in interviews promoting the Frasier revival, Grammer was asked about Cheers. He praised Danson, Allie, Went, and others with warmth and affection. But when Shelley Long's name came up, his words remained cold. "She was the most hated co-star I ever worked with," he repeated, as if the decades had done nothing to soften the blow. Shelley Long after Cheers. While Grammer soared to new heights, Shelley Long's career took a different path. After leaving Cheers, she pursued film roles, appearing in movies like Troop Beverly Hills and The Money Pit. While some were successful, she never recaptured the lightning-in-a-bottle magic of Diane Chambers. By the 1990s, her career had cooled significantly. She took on television guest spots, including her guest appearances on Frasier, but she never regained her former star power. Hollywood can be unforgiving, and Long became one of its cautionary tales. A brilliant actress whose career peak came early and faded quickly. Still, for fans of Cheers, she remains unforgettable. Diane Chambers was iconic, and her chemistry with Sam Malone remains one of the great romances of television. Whatever the conflicts behind the scenes, her work on screen left a permanent mark. For Grammer, however, nostalgia never outweighed reality. To him, Diane Chambers was a character worth respecting, but Shelley Long, the colleague, was not. By the time Cheers ended in 1993, Kelsey Grammer had lived through a decade of triumphs and trials. He had endured the misery of working alongside his most hated co-star. He had survived addiction, tragedy, and the pressures of fame. And yet, from all of it, he had emerged as a star in his own right, poised to take center stage in the next great sitcom of the era. The bar in Boston may have closed its doors, but for Kelsey Grammer, the story was only just beginning. And the bitterness that started there would follow him for years to come, even as he reached heights Shelley Long would never see again.